All right, being 7 o'clock, we'll call the Marathon County Board of Supervisors to order, please. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing because following the Pledge of Allegiance will be a silent moment of reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will have the reading of the notice, please.
The adjourned annual meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, composed of 38 members, will convene at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 Forest Street, Wausau, on Tuesday, February 22nd at 7 p.m., and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
Thank you. I would like to request all board members and individuals present to put their phones and other electronic devices on silent and not or vibrate, not to interrupt the meeting, and I thank you for your compliance. And we will move on to roll call, and I'd ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Arstead. Here. Beestrom.
Here.
Bizotto.
Here.
Boots. Here. Book. Here. Butke. Here. Christensen.
Here.
Seiler.
Here.
Conway. Here. Dickinson.
Here.
Drabeck.
Here.
Byfrick.
Here.
Fisher.
Here.
Gaber.
Here.
Gibbs.
Here.
Gonering.
Here.
Guild.
Here.
Gums.
Here.
Harris. Jacobson. Here. Johnson.
Here.
Krause.
Here.
Lamont.
Here.
Longenhan. Here. Leahy.
Here.
Lowe.
Here.
McEwen.
Here.
Oberbeck.
Here.
Opal. Robinson.
Here.
Rosenberg.
Here.
Seafelt.
Here.
Soybert.
Here.
Vol. Zhang.
Here.
Harris. Opal. Thank you.
Thank you, and I would like to welcome all of the visitors that we have that have joined either by WebEx or those that are joined by our other viewing audience. And thank you for your interest in Marathon County. And we'll move on to educational presentation and/or reports. Item 7B, Standing Committee Chairpersons or Designee. Any reports by Standing Committee Chairpersons? Vice Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to let the board know that hopefully our last Rules Review Committee will be scheduled for March 10th at 3 o'clock here. So if you have any suggestions or changes, either contact me or one of the other members on the Rules Review Committee, but hopefully that should be our last Rules Review Committee. So thank you.
Okay, any other designees or committee chairpersons reports? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to consent agenda item C8 through item C13A5. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Butke and second by Supervisor Longenhan. Is there any discussion on agenda items C8 through items C13A5? Seeing no discussion, we will move on to vote. All those in favor of approving agenda items C8 through items C13A5 signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you. And we will move on to resolutions. Item D, Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee. Item D14, approve 2022 budget transfers for Marathon County Department of Appropriations. Resolution 14-22. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Robinson and second by Vice Chair McEwen. Any discussion on that agenda item that does require a 2/3 majority vote? Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of approving the 2022 budget transfers for Marathon County Department of Appropriations, Resolution 14-22, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And the motion carries and is unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to E, County Board of Supervisors, Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee, Environmental Resources Committee, Park Commission. Purchase of Matthew Construction Company property for parkland. Resolution 15-22. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Seefeld and seconded by Supervisor Pfeffrick. Is there any discussion?
Supervisor Dickinson.
Supervisor Dickinson, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. So I assume it looks like this is just going to be added to the Brokaw Park that's there, County Park. Do we have any thought about a timeline of when that's going to be, manipulated, or is it just going to be forest, or what? And what kind of costs would be associated with that in that timeline?
We have the Parks Director, Jamie. Jamie, do you want to go ahead and provide the answer to those questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. We do not have a specific timeline for development on this yet. It is in our comprehensive outdoor recreation plan to put a master plan to it in the next 5 years. That will just be the planning stage. And depending upon what amenities go there, we'll see what the costs are. Right now, the vision for it is really to be more of a passive park with trails, possibly some cross-country skiing, hiking, mountain biking, but that will really come into the planning stages. So plan to get a plan in place in the next 5 years, but as far as development and costs, that will all come with what we decide to put there.
Supervisor
you.
Boots? Oh, go ahead. Supervisor Dickinson, any follow-up?
I just had one other question, or two questions, and that is, in the strategic plan, we talk about purchasing 320 acres a year. I'm just wondering how many acres we have actually purchased since the strategic plan went into effect, and what have been the cost of those purchases?
I don't believe that would be available. That information would be available at the fingertips. We'd have to look into that and provide that information to you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Boots.
I had a follow-up question for Jamie. Jamie, did you approach the Village of Maine at all with how they're going to do with their strategic plan on this? I guess is it discussions you've had with them, or has Betty not been involved in it at this point?
At this point, we haven't contacted them, but we have worked with them on some other, like the boat launch area and stuff that they have there. I do think when we get to that planning stage, they will be a partner on that and part of maybe the committee that kind of steers what we'd want to have that. We just haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay, Supervisor Fisher, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair.
Although this does look like it would be a good expansion to that area. Right now, that area is current parkland and as kind of Jamie said, very passive at this point. I did meet with the village board, and they did feel that they were kind of left kind of out of the loop on that, and we're not very excited about the possibility of that land coming off their rolls to move towards the parkland. So just in total, I think it's a great idea for the continuation expansion of our parks. However, just at this time, per my constituents, I'm going to vote no on this. However, that is just due to listening to my constituents. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Supervisor Boots?
Well, I guess I'm confused because we talked about this in the past, and with the distress already on the Village of Maine, now we're taking more taxes off the tax roll, and we're not doing a PILT on that, I assume, so we're putting them in more distress at this point, and I guess that's the way we're moving forward on this?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
To address the tax roll, the majority of this property is already in managed forest law, so it is less than $1,000 on the tax roll at this point. So that's what the impact of the land would be.
And the $1,000 is not 100% payable directly to the village. Is that not correct, Jamie? Under forest land?
That is correct.
That still is split amongst the taxing authorities. Supervisor
That
Woods?
is correct, yes.
I understand that, but once it comes out of managed forest crop, it could be developed along that riverfront.
The property is separate. Oh,
Go ahead,
sorry,
Jamie.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Jamie.
The property is separated from the riverfront by there is a large part of land that was the old landfill that separates the parkland from the river. So this is not, I guess that's a big part of this land in that it's wooded. It will always have that land that is the landfill, that the sludge pits are not going to go away. That's adjacent to the land and in between this land and the river.
So what you're saying, Jamie, is that's not river frontage nor frontage that would be developed in conjunction with view of the river?
Most likely not. I guess anything could go there. But
Sure. All right. Any other discussion? Supervisor Boots?
It's past my third time, so I guess I'll keep it quick, but I understand, I know this property very well. It's obviously, I grew up there, so I know what she's saying, but what I'm saying is if we take that over, I understand that, but you're not understanding, you're putting more hardship on it. They should have been approached before we even talked about this. I mean, this should have been a partnership, like you said, Jamie, I understand that, but then why weren't they addressed before we did this?
Okay, any other discussion? Supervisor Langenhan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is more of a question of process. When we purchase property anywhere in the county, is our policy to contact the governing bodies to let them know that we're interested in purchasing property and potentially taking out the tax roll? Just curious.
I'll let the Corp Counsel discuss that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think we have a specific policy that applies to any land purchase. I think depending on what the purchase is for and what department. I don't know of any policy that specifically applies to parkland purchases, at least that I'm aware of.
Supervisor Oberbeck?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the advantages is there is a snowmobile trail that runs down through that property that provides a lot of opportunity for development in the village of Brokaw, as well as across the way as far as the gas station and other places. If that trail is ever cut off, that will cut a major thoroughfare between east and west. And I think it's really advantageous if the county controls that. And it's a gorgeous piece of property as you go up that hill. So I think it's worthy of creating as far as tourism in that area. We continue to lose land for those types of trails. And if we can maintain that along the river, I think it's a real advantage to Marathon County and the village.
Okay, any other discussion? Go ahead, Supervisor Jacobson.
I'd request a roll call vote.
Roll call vote's been requested. Any other discussion? Supervisor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just my last comment. In not knowing what kind of purchases we've been making and kind of having this blanket strategic plan of 320 acres a year with not having a master plan in place, it just seems like we're picking up a piece of land and we're just kind of moving forward. That isn't to say there isn't planning in this purchase, but I do have some concerns about that we're going to be spending this money without that. And I do have a little bit of concern, certainly with what has been mentioned, that we haven't contacted the local municipality about that or had discussions with them. So I'm leaning towards voting no. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I can tell you that the strategic plan calls for 300 acres of purchase, and I know that we have never even come close to that kind of purchase per year since the strategic plan was adopted. That is factual. Any other discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote was requested. I'll ask Supervisor Lamont.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it a case where they weren't going to talk to the other people because they had to wait to see if we were willing to purchase it? And also, I think it's a very good price for that kind of land right there. So I guess I'm in favor of it.
Yeah, and I don't have the answer to that question. I think there was a negotiated purchase price that was negotiated, and then it came to this board, and came to the various committees, and was moved through the committees, through HR Finance Committee, Environmental Resources Committee, and the Park Commission. So all three of those committees have weighed in on this. Any other
Thank you.
discussion? Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. The roll call has been requested. I'd ask the clerk to call the roll.
Gums,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Jacobson, Johnson,
Yes.
Krause,
Yes.
Lamont,
Yes.
Longenhan. Yes. Leahy.
Yes.
Lowe. Yes. McEwen.
Yes.
Oberbeck.
Yes.
Opal. Robinson. Rosenberg.
Yes.
Seafelt.
Yes.
Soibert.
Yes.
Zhang.
Yes.
Arstead. Yes. Beestrom.
Yes.
Bizotto.
Yes.
Boots. Book. Butke. Christensen.
Yes.
Seiler.
Yes.
Conway. Dickinson.
No.
Drabeck.
Yes.
Fisher.
No.
Gaber.
Yes.
Gibbs.
Aye.
Gonering.
Yes.
Guild.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think you missed me.
Pfeiffer, I'm sorry. Well, I have you marked as I, so.
I was just telling.
Tell me, yeah, okay.
Record may not show that. You do the rest.
The motion carries 27 to 5, and I thank you. Moving on to item F, County Board of Supervisors, a discussion of a potential revision of the Nchc Tri-County Agreement Resolution 16-22. First off, this agenda item includes a motion to go into closed session to discuss the potential revisions of the NCHC Tri-County Agreement. Several supervisors have communicated a concern with going into closed session, particularly with our board rules allowing participation in closed session to occur via WebEx. The proposed revision of the NCHC Tri-County Agreement were passed by the NCHC Executive Committee and the Marathon County Health and Human Services Committee earlier today. Because the concerns that were expressed about proceeding into closed session, it is my intent at this time to proceed with the discussion and vote in open session. I have consulted with counsel attorney Andy Phillips, who has been working with the NCHC Executive Committee Board on these revisions, and Attorney Phillips is prepared to provide an overview of the proposed changes and the process that led to these proposed changes. If a question is asked of Attorney Phillips that would be more appropriately discussed in closed session, a supervisor may still make the motion. However, I believe at this time, Attorney Phillips is prepared to discuss these proposed changes with the board. So we have with us Attorney Andy Phillips from the law firm Atolis, and I would welcome him to provide a background and explanation of the memorandum that was presented to each of the board members, and along with the amended and revised and restated Tri-County Agreement. Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, members of the board. I'm sad that I'm not there in person, but I think that my car and my safety, thank you for allowing me to appear by video today. This is a conversation that frankly is probably 5-6 years in the making, because I know that the Marathon County Board, the Lincoln County Board, and the Langley County Board have all struggled at various points in North Central's existence to deal with issues surrounding accountability, transparency, and oversight of the North Central program. And so if I back up, and this is contained within the memo that was distributed to you this evening, but if I back up to a little over a year ago, we were engaged for 2 reasons. Number one is to investigate a current situation that was happening at North Central as it relates to the provision of certain benefits to certain employees within North Central, and determine whether that was problematic, not problematic, and so on. We completed the first part of that engagement, the investigation, in, I would say, in May, June, thereabouts, and delivered a report to the North Central Board and the North Central Executive Committee. As a result of the contents of that report, the North Central Executive Committee charged us with moving on to phase 2 of our engagement, which was to provide a recommendation as it relates to governance and organizational construct for North Central to, again, serve a couple of purposes. Number one, I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback. Can you all hear me okay, Mr. Chair?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'll continue. So essentially, the Executive Committee charged us with looking at 3 different areas as it relates to governance and organizational construct. Number one, we want to increase transparency so that the operations at North Central are transparent to not only the North Central Board, but also the member counties that comprise North Central under the Tri-County Agreements, and also the service recipients. In other words, we wanted a system that was going to be open and to the public, and everybody understood what was happening under what authority. Second, there was a desire for increased accountability and connectivity between the counties themselves as members of North Central and the North Central organization. And then finally, the Executive Committee made clear that they wanted there to be a governance and organizational structure that led to a decisive decision-making process to ensure and enhance the level of services that were provided to the citizens and other service recipients at North Central. And so given that charge, we went about phase 2 of our engagement. And that was to take a look at the different governance and organizational options available to North Central. Those are laid out for you in the memo. What we looked at is laid out there. And if I can summarize briefly, we looked at 3 basic models. One was to take the existing agreement and essentially try to strengthen the role of the executive committee as it relates to what the statutes refer to as retained county authority. That was attempted back in 2015, 16, thereabouts. And when I say attempted, it's not that the agreement itself in the English language that's used in that agreement was problematic. It's not. It was not problematic whatsoever. But I could see, just in looking at the historical documentation, that there was a desire on the part of the member counties to have a level of connectivity between the counties and the organization, to have a level of accountability between the organization back to the counties, so that the counties had ownership, if you will, of North Central. And so we looked at revising the agreement to strengthen some of the provisions that spoke to this concept of retained county authority. In other words, what kind of decisions required input from the various county boards of the counties that comprised North Central. Again, it was an attempt to look at what had been tried back in 2015, 2016 that led to the 2017 agreement, the role of the Retained County Authority Committee. Some of you may remember that committee back in the 2017 agreement, and what became the role of the Executive Committee in the current 2020 agreement. So that was one thing we looked at. Second thing we looked at is what if, and again, this option was not something that anybody was particularly interested in pursuing, but what if we dissolved North Central and each county had its own individual Department of Community Programs? And then the 3 counties, Lincoln, Langley, Marathon, would enter into a series of contractual arrangements to share services, to share personnel, and so on. As I mentioned, that was not the optimal outcome because I was told by the executive committee and by leadership from all counties, no, we want to have North Central succeed. We like our partnership. We think we're really good at this. So let's figure out a way that we can work together, but still have accountability and transparency that we desire. And so that's when I started looking at what becomes the recommended model under the memo that I provided you and is embodied within the terms of the amended and restated intergovernmental agreement that is also before you this evening. If we look at 51.42 of the statutes, that's the statute that mandates counties maintain a Department of Community Programs. Counties can maintain a single department solely for that particular county, or counties can join with other counties and form a multi-county Department of Community Programs. Of course, Marathon County has joined with Lincoln County and Langley County to form a multi-county Department of Community Programs. There are 2 other such programs within the state. There's one down in Iowa and Grant County called Unified Community Services. And then you've got Forest, Vilas, and Oneida counties that make up the Human Service Center. And so while it's not unique, this is a model, a multi-county model, that is certainly not the norm as it relates to other counties around the state. What is the norm under 51.42 of the statutes is that in counties with a county executive or a county administrator, that Department of Community Programs is operated much like any other county department within the county.
Andy, we just lost you.
Are you able to hear me?
Now we're able to hear you. Yeah, we lost you after you talked about any other county department.
Okay. Hopefully you can hear me now, so I'll continue talking, and if not, you can just make fun of me later. That's fine too. So when we're talking about this concept of an administrator or executive county, counties with a county executive or administrator, the Department of Community Programs within those counties is similar to other departments within those counties. In other words, the director of the Department of Community Programs is appointed by your county administrator subject to confirmation by the county board. Oversight is provided by the director and ultimately the county administrator or the county executive. In other words, it's very similar, like I said, to other departments within the county. In counties with an administrative coordinator, there is a community programs board which serves in both a governance and a policy-making role. And so that board has responsibilities as it relates to operations of the Department of Community Programs. Now, if we look again at the administrator or executive model, it's true that under 51.42, there is still a board of community programs, but that board serves in a policy-making capacity. They provide programmatic suggestion, input, and oversight, but they are not directly responsible. That board is not directly responsible for the operations of the Department of Community Programs. And if you look at the statutes and we think about what we're creating as a multi-county partnership here between Marathon, Lincoln, and Langley counties, I thought, based upon the goals that the executive committee laid out, based upon the goals that county board leadership has provided, that the best model would be to have an executive committee that serves as the de facto administrator or county executive making operational decisions, overseeing the finances of the organization, and otherwise directing that multi-county Department of Community Programs, as opposed to having that authority reside within that unaccountable, if you will, board of the Community Programs Department. And when I say unaccountable, I understand that that board is comprised of individuals appointed by the counties that form the Tri-County Partnership. I understand that. But when we look at the composition of the executive committee, we've got the highest ranking administrative officials from each of the three counties. So we've got the Marathon County Administrator, we've got the Langley County Administrator, we've got the Lincoln County Administrative Coordinator, and then we have an appointee from the North Central Board who is on the Marathon County Board of Supervisors. And so it's that committee that has direct accountability back to each of the county boards. And so it is through that process of revising this agreement to, again, not take away from anything that North Central is doing, but to take governance and transform it from the county administrative coordinator model, which in my opinion decreases the level of transparency, accountability, and connectivity, and move it into the county executive or county administrator model, which increases transparency, accountability, and connectivity. That's what we see in this amended and restated agreement. And that, in my estimation, is the best route to go for the three counties to allow North Central to flourish, to provide an ownership model so that the counties, as owners of the Tri-County Department of Community Programs, have a say in how that program is being operated, have oversight from a financial standpoint, and have, again, that direct linkage between the executive committee and the county boards of the counties that form the Tri-County Department of Community Programs. And so that's ultimately the recommendation contained within the memo. And so before you as Marathon County tonight is the question, do we move forward with this model? And if you decide tonight that you want to move forward with this amended and restated intergovernmental agreement, it would then proceed before the Lincoln and Langley County boards for their consideration as well. And they would hear the same type of discussion from me, getting into the why it is that I'm recommending the model that you have before you tonight. Once all of that is done, then we go to the Department of Health Services and have a discussion about this agreement and ask for their approval to operate in this way. Now, again, I want to make clear that I don't think, at least in my estimation, and I've not been around for the entire history of North Central, so forgive me, but in my estimation, this amended and restated agreement does not represent a whole change in the way that North Central does business. I think that the counties have historically desired accountability, transparency, connectivity. My point is that the restated agreement aligns more closely with an accountable and transparent governance model that is contained within 51.42 of the statutes. And that is clarity of roles between the Board of Community Programs and the county administrator or executive, or in our case, the executive committee. And it provides clarity as to the decision-making authority among the various actors, if you will, within North Central. And so with that, Mr. Chair, if there's anything I missed, please feel free to let me know. But otherwise, I'll turn it back to you because I understand there are others who would like to speak to this question tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. And you are correct. We have with us this evening the legal counsel for and happens to be the representative that is appointed to the NCHC Executive Committee, Robin Stowe, and he would like to address the board on the potential revisions that have been drafted, and so I would turn it over to Mr. Stowe.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Robin Stowe. I'm the Corporation Counsel for Langlade County. I've been in this position for over 30 years now. Over my tenure with Langlade County, I've been appointed, I think, 3 different times to serve on the North Central Healthcare Board. Typically, the Langlade County Board would meet earlier in the month than either Marathon County or Lincoln County. It just so happens that during the recent term of this board, we changed our date to the 4th Monday. So we will be considering adopting the agreement on February 28th. And although I can't speak for the Langlade County Board, all 21 members, they have received periodic updates from me on the revisions to the agreement. I've been reporting out to 3 separate committees along the way. And I am able to share with you tonight that I do speak for the county board chairman and our county administrator. They wholeheartedly support these revisions, as do I.
Thank you, Mr. Stowe. And we also have with us the Lincoln County Administrative Coordinator, Ms. Kate Wiley. Ms. Wiley?
Good evening, everyone. I do want to express my gratitude for all the work that everybody, especially Attorney Phillips, has done on this Tri-County agreement. I have been on the North Central Board with Robin Stowe and Lance Leonard and Kurt Gibbs for just over a year now. This was all new to me, so as I've walked this path, I've kept my county board apprised of all the goings-on, partly because I am an administrative coordinator, and also because my newness to the role and to the organization. So I can say with confidence and with the permission of my county board chair that Lincoln County wholeheartedly supports this. We strive for transparency. We yearn for the engagement that we haven't had under the current contract, and really wish to have this change so we can keep engaged. We can continue to have the relationship, have a voice at the table, and so forth. We were supposed to meet under special meeting tonight at 5 to vote on this, but given what we thought the weather was going to be in our area, we canceled it. So we have yet to reschedule, but we were anxious to set a special county board meeting to approve this, and are disappointed that we were not able to do that tonight. But again, just to reiterate, Lincoln County is in full support of this new Tri-County agreement.
Well, thank you, Ms. Wiley, and thank you, Mr. Stowe, for your comments, and I also want to express my sincere thank you for all of your efforts on the North Central Community Services Program Board, Executive Committee and Board for all of your work and dedication to a multi-county Department of Community Services moving forward. With that, is there anything the administrator would like to add?
No, I think, the only comment I'll echo is the one that Attorney Phillips offered. I know you have a new tri-county agreement in front of you, the amended and restated intergovernmental agreement, but I really don't view this as a fundamental shift in direction from each of the prior agreements that the Marathon County Board of Supervisors have approved in 2015, and then the most recent document that was approved in 2020. I do think it accomplishes one important piece that Attorney Phillips represented in his memo, and that is it utilizes a statute, another statute that is available to us, specifically section 59.52 sub 7, to effect using statute more effectively what we attempted to do, what the county boards attempted to do through contractual provisions in the 2015 and 2019 agreement. So I think it is a continued improvement effort that we've been working with, and the goal has been through the executive committee as well as the full board and North Central Healthcare Board to really strengthen that agreement. And I think there are some facets of this that do that. So I certainly support, as do the other members of the executive committee, the intent of the restated agreement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So with that, I will open it up for discussion amongst the board members. Questions? Supervisor Robinson.
I have a series of clarifying questions, and the first one deals with the appointment of the executive committee, and the North Central Community Services Board membership would be subject to the confirmation by the appropriate county boards. But in the agreement, we specifically reference that the county administrator shall appoint a member of the Marathon County Board to that executive committee without requiring county board approval. So I'll be making an amendment to amend that to follow our normal procedures consistent with state law with the administrator. The second area of concern is relative to the powers of the executive committee to amend the budget during the course of the year and modify programs. And I've had some discussions with the administrator and the county board chair relative to the county board's ability to review those changes. And perhaps you could address the understanding. I'd just like to have that on the record so we have a clarity of purpose.
Sure. I can take that if I may, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So specifically, there are a couple of provisions within the document, and I'll point to the provisions, the general financial provisions that are on page 14. But succinctly put, currently under the tri-county agreement, if there is a desired change in programs, there's not a requirement that it come back to the county board to do that. And I will also say that's historically been the case with programs and services at North Central Healthcare. The North Central Healthcare Board, for example, I believe in about 2010 made some pretty significant changes to the delivery of AODA programs within Marathon County. And the contract at the time that was in place did not require each of the member counties to approve that in any fundamental way. The intent of this new document, while not expressly indicating that the county boards are required to be consulted, I think as a practical matter, they certainly will be. And as Attorney Phillips indicated, the desire of the agreement is to have the executive committee, the highest each of the highest administrative officials from each of the counties, as well as one additional Marathon County board member, be not only consulted by North Central Healthcare leadership, but ultimately have the ability to direct the pursuit of new programs, make substantial modifications to existing programs, or call for the discontinuation of existing programs. And the intent there is to, again, strengthen that tie back to each of the member counties. As a practical matter, I think as Supervisor Robinson referenced, it behooves each of the representatives, the administrative representatives, to bring back to the respective member counties the proposals for any substantial modifications. But under the statute 5142, if you pursue a pure administrative coordinator model, as Attorney Phillips referenced, you don't have that authority outside of your budget allocation under statute. I don't know, Attorney Phillips, if there's anything you would like to add to clarify the question, or if Kate or Robin would like to add anything.
No, if I could very briefly, I think you're right, Mr. Leonard, in terms of how you characterize the role of the governing board in an administrator coordinator model versus an administrator/executive model. The accountability is not there as it relates to some of those decisions that are made by a board under the administrative coordinator model. And to me, and I think to the executive committee and to county leadership, that was a problem. And that's what we attempted, and I think we did very well in addressing that in the context of this amended and restated agreement.
If I may, one other thing I wanted to add, there is a provision that does call for each of the 3 counties to identify, and this is a provision that carried through from the 2015 agreement that was approved by each of the counties. It calls for each of the counties to identify a committee to which each of those executive committee members would come back and provide periodic reports. And I can find that is on page 9 of the draft agreement, specifically provision Roman numeral 4D, titled Relationship Between Executive Committee and County's Designated Standing Committee. It calls for each county board of supervisors to designate a county board standing committee to which the executive committee will provide periodic reports to get at some of the issues that I think Attorney Phillips has referenced, but also Supervisor Robinson with the question.
Okay, Supervisor Robinson.
Then I have 2 more questions. One deals with the whole issue of county appropriations and just how we envision this new agreement involving the county board. And the Community Services Board and the will work with the Executive Committee to develop those guidelines and policy parameters, and then between August and September present that to the county board for the inclusion. But how will we be afforded as a county board the opportunity to engage in the discussions of the priorities and the budgeting through our normal budgeting process, and what process will we have available to us to make sure that again that input is there, and that would apply to both the budgeting, the development of the budgeting and the budgeting guidelines and priorities. And then the final point would be there's just an inconsistency in the document relative to the effective date, in so much as one section references May 1st, and the other one references upon adoption of the entity. So I think that needs to be clarified.
Mr. Leonard?
Sure, I can take the first point about the financial process in terms of budget adoption or budget development and adoption. That really is laid out on page 14. Historically, I can tell you when I was appointed by the county board to serve on the Retained County Authority Committee, the process that I took was similar to that which we take here in Marathon County and from the Office of Administration relative to budget formation for any other department. That is, I sought information from department heads, internal department heads, as well as external stakeholders about what the priorities were in terms of services, and brought those to North Central Healthcare so that they could use that in building their budget. I would envision that using a similar process here relative to Marathon County. I would engage with local stakeholders to identify what those budget priorities are. Also engage the Marathon County Board in terms of what, if any, new priorities or shifts in priorities have occurred that should be adopted as part of the upcoming budget. We would then provide those budget priorities and directives to, as a member of the executive committee, we'd meet and discuss those and provide those directives to the leader of North Central Healthcare that they would then use to develop their budget proposal, that they would do that in accordance with statute and the Tri-County Agreement, utilizing the input from the North Central Board itself, the 5142 Board. Again, that's a policy-making body. It's recommending budget priorities, but those the actual budget itself will come back to the executive committee for approval. But ultimately, the budget allocation for each of the 3 counties comes back to each respective county board for consideration and approval. And you'll see that on page 14. That's some additional language we added this year to really make that very clear that at the end of the day, the role of the respective county boards is to evaluate the budget requests. And that's under section 7E1, calls for operation and capital budgets for NCCSP, that's the North Central Community Service Program, shall be prepared and approved by the executive committee as required by this agreement and provided to each of the 3 counties as requests for funding approval. So again, making clear that ultimately the county boards are the ones that are providing the ultimate funding approval relative to the North Central Healthcare budget.
Does that answer your questions, Supervisor Robinson? Okay, thank you. Any other, Supervisor Bizzotto?
Thank you, Chair. This legal memorandum that we were sent references an initial memorandum, and I'm wondering if we received a copy of that or if we have access to that, and if not, if a copy could be provided.
Can you help me understand, Supervisor Bizzotto, where you're referencing that?
Mr. Chair, if I could, it's the initial, it was the memorandum that we produced as a result of the first.
And Andy, you froze up. Oh, that was the memorandum of the investigation that was started when we contracted the North Central Community Services Program Board contracted with the then Von Brayson and Roper law firm and it spelled out in there what the NCHC board was asking the firm to do. So it was initially doing the investigation, and then also the follow-up was the recommendations. So that's what that's referring to. Further clarifying questions, Supervisor Bizzotto?
Would it be possible for us to get a copy of that? Not that we can get it in time to factor into our decision tonight, but I think it would be helpful.
Yes, we can get that to you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Lamont?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a quick question. When did the memo go out that's before us? I didn't get it.
The memo would have been sent out under Michael, the Corp Council's delivery on Friday.
Okay, so there's an attachment to that. I read his article.
Correct. There would have been two attachments. One would have been the memorandum, and then one is the amended and restated intergovernmental agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Boots.
I make a motion to approve the revisions to the NCHC Tri-County Agreement.
Second, Johnson.
There's a motion made and seconded by, motion by Supervisor Boots and seconded by Supervisor Johnson to approve the amended and restated intergovernmental agreement. We have Supervisor Dickinson has a question. Supervisor Dickinson is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple questions. One is on item 4C3, A and B related to director compensation. On B, it says that from time to time, the executive committee shall have the authority to amend the compensation plan for the director at their sole discretion. I was just looking for some clarifying information about what that means time to time. Is that it would seem to be a little bit loose. Perhaps that could be tightened up. Is that every 6 months? Is that a yearly performance management review? Is that a bonus structure? So that's one question. And then the second question is going back to item 4D, the relationship, where it says that the report would be given to the standing committee for the board with periodic reports. I would like to see that to be firmed up. If that could be, I don't know if that means annual. Is that going to be semi-annual, every 3 months? So some clarification on the two of those, please. Thank you.
Administrator Leonard, you want to?
Sure, I'll give you my explanation why my vote on the executive committee was to approve the language that was provided. And Attorney Phillips, you can certainly provide your thought process in drafting that language. But with respect to the director compensation provision, that is certainly, to your point, Supervisor Dickinson, it's a bit vague. I can tell you in past agreements in the 2015 and then also in the 2019-2020 agreement, it called for the executive committee to have the ability to review compensation annually relative to the leader of North Central Healthcare. My 2 cents relative to timing is that it would be at the discretion of the executive committee, and it allows the executive committee to address compensation in the way that ultimately the executive committee deems appropriate. Right now with North Central Healthcare, historically, we've done an annual appraisal of the chief executive officer that resulted in annual changes in compensation. We also did a semi-annual evaluation that did not have an impact on compensation, but was instead what I'll term a check-in relative to performance. As it relates to the reporting relationship back to the respective county boards, my 2 cents again as to why some vague language may be advantageous to the county board. If the county board in Marathon County requests that the administrator and the other Marathon County appointee, Marathon County Board of Supervisors appointee to the executive committee provide monthly updates to the county board, I'll certainly do that. If the county board desires quarterly or annual, I think it's entirely within the scope of authority of the county board through their oversight of me, certainly, to direct me to provide whatever level of reporting you want. Right now, that reporting relationship within Marathon County is spelled out in your organizational board rules, that the Health and Human Services Committee is has the governance reporting relationship with North Central Healthcare. But if there is a desire to have a more clear language, certainly we can have an amendment to the motion that's offered. I hope that is helpful, Supervisor Dickinson, and I don't know if Attorney Phillips has if he'd like to offer his thoughts in terms of the language that he drafted.
The only thing I will add to that briefly is that when it comes to director compensation, of course, there's a budget process for North Central where the executive committee does not have the authority to unilaterally commit county resources. It has to come back to the county. And so when it comes to director compensation, the verbiage used within the agreement is approval of the director compensation plan, not necessarily specific on compensation. So it's left open like that for a reason. The reason it's left open is so that the executive committee has the ability to adopt and react to whatever the situation may require on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. subject, of course, to the budgetary approval process contained within the agreement as it relates to the various county boards.
That was the only thing that I was going to add, and thank you for that, Andy. I was going to mention that obviously any salary is and wages structure down there is going to be subject to budgetary constraints. I got Supervisor Fisher first.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. I would just like to say I'm very excited about the current interest both from the Lincoln and the Langley County boards, at least as their representatives have spoken tonight. And I'm very much in favor of this renewed agreement and the go forward with this resolution. This North Central Healthcare, of course, is an excellent resource here for our area that services the members of our public that would not receive that service in any other fashion. I would just like to make sure that with this amended agreement, I'm excited as well that the added transparency to this board, and then of course to the residents here of Marathon County, as well as Lincoln and Langlade, just to move forward, that this would then as well help to empower the executive management team at NCHC, to be able to run their facility in the nature that is going to end up with a successful product servicing our residents. But again, I'm excited about this, and will definitely be voting in favor. Thank you.
Supervisor Robinson.
I'd just like to echo Supervisor Fisher's comments relative to the quality of the programming that we have and our desire to continue that and move forward. But I would like to amend Article 4, Paragraph B, Executive Committee composition at the end of the paragraph, in a Marathon County member appointed by the county administrator. And I'm not sure if it should be subject to the approval of the county board. Subject to confirmation by the county board. So I would move to insert subject to the confirmation of the county board.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by
Supervisor
Supervisor Conway. Is there any discussion? So the motion is to amend Section 4B and add at the very end, at the approval of the county board. Subject to approval or confirmation. Subject to confirmation by the county board. Supervisor Boots.
So the current executive committee, Robin and the rest crew, are in favor of the way it is. So is the Health and Human Services Board with a unanimous vote. So I will not be supporting the amendment.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Administrator Leonard, please.
Just for everyone's knowledge, pursuant to section 59.18, sub 2, sub C, which is the statute that relates to the powers of a county administrator, any appointments that I make as a county administrator, and Attorney Phillips will correct me if I'm wrong, they are all subject to confirmation by the county board. Am I right, Andy?
I hesitate to say this, Lance, but you are 100% correct.
Supervisor Robinson.
Just for clarification, is the needed for that, or the justification for it. Elsewhere in the document, we reference the approval of the North Central Community Program Board, subject to the rules of the county. And I just wanted to make sure that we were clear to the public and others that that appointment needed to come through the county board.
Okay, we have an amendment that has been made and seconded to add subject to confirmation by the county board for item 4B. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Again, I think the point made by Supervisor Boots, that wasn't that hasn't been run through the executive committee, nor has it been through Health and Human Services. Supervisor Lamont is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Roll call vote has been requested on, and that roll call vote is on the amendment.
Yes.
Okay. Supervisor Longenhan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to wind the clock back maybe 2 minutes here in regards to what the administrator had just said regarding the appointments that he or she would make to certain committees, that there is a process or something provides for the requirement that the appointments that the administrator makes is approved by the county board. What is that again?
State statutes 59.18, parent 2, parent C. It says appointments of members to all boards and commissions will be confirmed by the board.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Okay, again, a vote of aye will insert the language in item 4B, subject to confirmation by the board. A vote no would not provide for that language in the contract on the Tri-County agreement. And roll call vote has been requested, and we will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Harris.
No.
Jacobson. Johnson.
No.
Krause.
Yes.
Lamont.
Yes.
Longenhan. No. Leahy.
Supervisor Leahy?
Lowe. McEwen.
No.
Oberbeck. No. Opal.
No.
Robinson.
Aye.
Rosenberg.
Yes.
Seafelt.
No.
Soibert. Supervisor Soibert. Zhang.
Yes.
Arstead. No. Beestrom.
Yes.
Bizotto.
No.
Boots. No. Book. No. Butke.
Yes.
Christensen. Supervisor Christensen.
No.
Seiler.
No.
Conway. Yes. Dickinson.
Yes.
Drabeck.
No.
Beifrick.
Yes.
Fisher.
Yes.
Gaber.
Yes.
Gibbs.
No.
Gonering.
Yes.
Guild.
No.
Gums.
No.
Leahy.
Leahy is yes.
Thank you. Soibert. Supervisor Soibert.
Like someone's trying to call in.
He's not replying.
Do we have any others that are?
Nope.
And the motion fails 18-15. Now back to the original motion to approve the amended and restated intergovernmental agreement establishing a multi-county Department of Community Programs. Any further discussion? We had Supervisor Jacobson. Question has been called. Is there objection to question being called? Supervisor?
I do not object, but I have a point of clarity, I need some clarification on something.
Okay. Go ahead.
I raised my hand prior to the question being called. Will I be allowed to speak?
How is our rule is if there,
Right? Oh, yeah.
if I'm remembering I'm having Corp Counsel review it, but as I remember, our rules state that if somebody has been in the queue, question has been called, they will be recognized and allowed to speak prior to question and the stopping of discussion. So,
Mr. Chair, was I in the queue? Okay. Mr. Chair, I do not object to the question being called.
thank you. So is there any objection to question being called? Without objection, all those in favor of the stoppage of discussion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carried. Question's been called. We will proceed to vote on the motion to approve the amended and restated intergovernmental agreement establishing a multi-county Department of Community Programs. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. And the motion is carried and it is unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Attorney Phillips, and thank you to the other executive committee members from NCHC for joining us this evening. Moving on to miscellaneous business. Under item G, 17, announcements and/or requests. Any announcements and/or requests? I do have some. The clerk needs signatures from HR, Finance, County Board, Environmental Resources, Park Commission, Health and Human Services. With that, we are down to item
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Supervisor Johnson?
Supervisor Johnson.
Wanted to mention at the Paralympics, we have a Marathon County resident participating in that. Matthew Toombs is the skip or the captain of the Team USA in the curling competition, and hopefully he's going to bring home a gold medal. And that starts this weekend, or excuse me, next week. But just thought I'd give the shout out to Matt Toombs, a regular curler, and who regularly kicks my butt, and hopefully he does the same to everybody else. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that announcement. Any other announcements and/or requests? Supervisor Lamont.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess it's a request to add on to what was mentioned on Thursday night about having the board be given an update of the VAERS data for Marathon County so that we could have more information about vaccine injuries and deaths and serious adverse side effects. So has there been any?
Yes, there has. There's been discussion. I would request that question be referred to right now. The chair of the Health Board, Supervisor Robinson.
So, Mr. Chair, we had a discussion Monday morning with the health officer, Scudari, and she is reaching out to the state of Wisconsin. Currently, VAERS data is available on a nationwide basis, and you can break it down by state. The ability to break it down by county is limited, and she was trying to set up a meeting later this week with the Department of Health Services to find out whether or not we could break down the information more granularly to satisfy the request. So we hope to have a report at some future meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Harris is next.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to recognize that February is Black History Month. It's an opportunity to recognize the contributions of African Americans in the United States. It's also an opportunity to recognize the contributions of African Americans within our county. So I just wanted to recognize that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements and/or requests? Okay, again, a reminder, we need signatures from HR Finance, County Board, Environmental Resources, Parks Commission, and Health and Human Services. With that, we are down to item number 18. What is your pleasure? Motion by Supervisor Jacobson and seconded by Supervisor Rosenberg to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say no. And we stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.